put and how do we mitigate that down to, maybe only leave that building open 10% of the way. And I don't mean by leaving it open by turning it into a prison, but just putting certain things in place that help the building functional, be more functional and safer for the people that occupy it. Again, mentioned not turning it into a prison. Our goal as security consultants is to make sure the environment the architects and engineers create stays very functional, and we don't make it look anything close to that. I do a lot of work with schools, a lot of work with hospitals and things like that. And, it's challenging sometimes, but you have to make those locations safe without losing the look of an educational institution for just, for record on that part. So there are some challenges there, but we always get it done. Next slide. So things that we always look at, threat. What are our threats? There's two different threats we look at when we start looking at stuff, the known versus the unknown. Known threats can be, let's look at the area we're in. Are we in a high crime area where we're going to put this new building? Are we in a low crime area? Does it have violent crimes? Does it have theft? And we can kind of start molding stuff around what our known threats are in that area. Unknown threat is we have to look at workplace violence, active shooters. That's an unknown threat. Can it happen? Sure. Can it happen anywhere in the country? Sure. But it's unknown if it'll happen here or not. We still have to prepare for it, and we still have to mitigate that threat. But it's things we need to look at. Also with unknown threats, we dealt with an unknown threat for the past year and a half, the COVID. That was an unknown threat to a bunch of different business sectors. Some were affected a lot more than others. So how do we design lobbies, and how do we design buildings now to be smarter buildings? So the big thing now on the market is touchless entry. How do we get visitors or even employees in from their point of entry all the way to their workspace without them having to touch stuff, whether it's an elevator button, a badge scan, or anything else? So that's an unknown threat that now we're looking at, and now it's a known one, and we're trying to make sure everybody stays safe with that. Vulnerability and gap. The big thing is a lot of places get built. You deal with this with definitely existing buildings. Is okay, the structure's there. We're going in to maybe retrofit or add a wing or whatever we're doing. What are the vulnerabilities and gaps that are existing in this building already? How do we address them? How do we make sure those get covered in the expansion we're doing of that building, and we don't create the same vulnerabilities and gaps? And really, again, looking to close them by giving the clients, giving the architects, giving engineers recommendations during the design phase of how to close those gaps. And then overall, how we judge our risk is just taking those threats, putting that with our vulnerabilities and the consequence of where we think it rates of, is it high to happen, low to happen? And that will really show us our risk for the location we're building in, and then the type of design we're designing. Next slide. Now, I will say, if you have any questions throughout the whole presentation, please let me know. You can ask right away. You don't have to wait till the end, and we can get those answered for you if anything pops up. Now, more firms we are seeing are getting consultants involved earlier, which is good. I've had the privilege of doing a lot with even like pro stadiums, hospitals, educational, whether it's K through 12 higher ed, a lot of government stuff. Doing a big project right now for the state of Minnesota on all their veteran homes. So at different phases, we're seeing the trend starting where they are getting consultants involved a lot earlier, because if they get us involved later, stuff has already been designed, and then we get in there and have to change certain things, and it just slows down the process. It can cost more money. So we are seeing security consultants getting involved very early in the design phase, which is a good thing. People are considering safer design a lot more now. I would say there's definitely a recent uptick since we saw a lot of civil unrest throughout the country in the past couple of years. Obviously, with COVID and with shootings and active shooter events and things like that. Before it was almost a taboo or just kind of different to get a security consultant involved in design and build phases. Now we're seeing that really it sets companies apart and clients like that. And a lot of design firms are definitely getting consultants and using them a lot more. And what it's doing is it's just preventing other emergencies from happening within that client's location. And it really helps them feel at ease and a lot better with their design that the security and safety is being considered within it. And we can get very fine-tooth comb with it if the client wants that, or broad spectrum so you don't see it as much and just limit certain things depending on budget and everything else that goes involved. So I've had some clients, especially when it comes to more like pro stadiums and stuff like that, where people say, hey, security's not a budget. Don't worry about it. Spend what you need to. And we just look at it from a full effect and start going. And if we present it to the client then and they want to chop things away, we can make recommendations on what to trim back, what not to, and also make the prioritization as far as, hey, this is why we're recommending this. This is more important than this, and really help them understand what's the priority when cutting back certain things because of budget. Next slide. Do I have any questions at this point, by the way?
Yes, Ryan, this is Dennis Lundquist. Just, I don't know if you can give us a couple of quick examples or an example of something along the lines of what you might consider, I guess, with a big budget, if you will, for stadiums in terms of this kind of security and kind of trying to design, I guess, something a little different, or maybe if there are those things.
Yeah, so you're seeing a big trend right now with inside stadiums with AI and so artificial intelligence that's going inside of their camera systems, and it's definitely they're using a lot of facial recognition. With the facial recognition software, they're looking for people that may be on their BOLO list, which is be on the lookout for. People who have gotten kicked out of a stadium for like throwing a beer on the field or maybe causing a fight or something like that, or threats to the players. You're seeing a lot of facial recognition. Now that's twofold. So they're using it for security, but they're also using these algorithms for facial recognition to see where people go, because they're also tracking, which is interesting, how many people go into their stores for merchandise in other areas and how long they spend in there so they can see sales and things like that. So it's always a good sale to the client when you can say, hey, look, you can use this for security, but you can also use this for sales reasons and marketing where people are spending money. You're seeing gunshot detection being considered a lot more within large stadiums and kind of across the market now because it's a newer thing. But you're seeing gunshot detection and mass communication being used a lot more. So evacuations of large arenas, events, and stadiums can happen a lot easier, and you know where the threats are. And you really saw that kind of start spinning up a lot after the Vegas event, after the active shooter in Vegas.
Well, there's a lot to it, as you've just indicated, and a lot of it's in the operational aspect. Maybe not so much in how you design the actual facility, although maybe you just didn't get into that.
Yeah. So in the design, we want to make sure that so there's certain technology with the gunshot detection where they have to be certain distance from each other. Some gunshot detection is line of sight. So that definitely goes into the design of where are we putting it. If it is line of sight, let's say shooter detection systems that uses a line of sight one versus Eagle gunshot detection that doesn't use line of sight. So where are we placing those? When it gets into the design, how is the wiring being put in? How are these sensors working? Where are we best placing them? All of that side of things, it definitely goes in with more of the security design aspect of that.
Okay, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Yep, no problem. Okay, so big thing to realize, not all buildings are the same, right? They definitely require different types of things where design comes in for security design aspects. You definitely want to consider educational as far as, again, they don't want disruption to the children. They want very safe institutions, but so they keep looking like an educational institution. And like I said earlier, not a prison. So as it relates to design, you have to be more, I would say, creative with designing schools. There was one elementary school I helped with recently where we have to consider areas of mass gathering, right? When it comes to school shootings and things like that. So if we have a clear line of sight from the second floor into the cafeteria, just because that's how the building was designed, it's not the safest thing when I look at risk. Because if a shooter can get up to the second floor, they have full access to shoot down in the cafeteria during the lunch hour. So I got with then the interior designer for the architectural firm, and we came up with a solution to place flags and banners of different colleges and things like that the kids could see and think maybe they want to go to a certain college, but we could hang them in a certain way that would obscure the view from the second floor into the cafeteria. So if a shooter got up there, they wouldn't be able to see anybody in the cafeteria. So it's little things like that we have to consider when you're designing buildings and the different types of buildings we're designing. So with the different types, there's different threats and priorities of threats that come with each building. So there's definitely a difference with market sectors and how we design those buildings and help the architects design them safer. Next slide. So what I always do is I always start with the perimeter line and work my way in. There's a lot of stuff you can do through environmental aspects with design to mitigate risk. So if you're starting on the outside, fencing can be important, a very important aspect. How do we do that? How far back is our shrubs cut back? Where do we place trees? Where do we place things like that so they don't obscure the view of cameras and we can see, let's say, vehicles or individuals on approach to the building from a security aspect? How do we design a front gate entrance? How do we design a visitor's entrance versus employee entrance in the different security considerations that need to go into there? Ooh, I see a question. What was a question that just popped up? It just disappeared. Okay, someone says for DOD, DOS, GSA facilities, there are ATFP standards. What security standards guidelines do you use for private facilities? So yes, we definitely work with the anti-terrorism force protection standards. I do that a lot. Always, of course, with DOD and government facilities. There's a lot of standards that go out with private facilities that are more with ASIS, which is the American Standard for Industrial Security. But then there's also things that a lot of us that are certified through Homeland Security and FEMA standards, as far as risk, threat, vulnerability, and things like that, that we use as guiding tools. Um, I've been doing this a long time. So we look at security. When we look at a building, we look at design things, we see it different. And we start seeing, okay, we need this here, we need that there, and start chopping away at that. There are some standards from ASIS, Homeland Security, and FEMA. They're very thin. So we just have to fill in those gaps of where they didn't fill them in, if that answers your question.
Good, thank you.
Uh-huh. Now, when I start from the perimeter and work my way in, it's using it almost like a filter, right? What percentage can I start filtering out before we get internal into the building as far as threats and vulnerabilities and things like that? And then what technologies can I use to accomplish this? And again, our job is to work with you guys to ensure the building doesn't lose its aesthetics, that it still looks good, and we accomplish all goals of the client being happy with the way their building looks, but it's also safe. So it's kind of fun for the security consultant end, because you got to be creative, right? And no project's the same. Everything's different. So we really just have to start filtering things out and seeing what we can mitigate before it even gets to us at the building. And then from the building, we treat it different and start working on the building. So a lot of people, what they're doing is just using fencing and think, I can throw up a fence all the way around and it'll be good. But there's a lot of stuff. I mentioned environment. If we're designing, let's say, an office building, there is so much glass fronts and glass buildings used in design these days. If we can design a building that has glass in the front and things like that, one of our big things we always look at is, oh gosh, can a car run into this and drive right through the lobby? Can a car drive into the CEO's office or HR's office if they just got terminated and they're upset and they're an employee? So we can use things like decorative rocks and other environmental things that can mitigate, a car being able to do that or get close to the building. And it's better looking than just a bollard that's out there, And so we look at things like that. Lighting is a huge aspect of what we do. How do we design the lighting so that it's safe and it reinforces, especially safety in parking lots for employees that work after hours, or maybe they're alone working late. So we want to look at that stuff. And then signage and checkpoints are huge. People don't realize that bad people that want to do bad things, if they see a building is under video surveillance by just a sign that's out there, or there's anti-theft measures in place or intrusion technology or anything like that, a lot of times people back away. So even just a simple sign or signage around the perimeter can help really mitigate break-ins and other crimes from happening in parking lots and at the building itself. So we kind of look at everything as a whole. Now, once we go inside into the building internally, we're looking at front vestibules a lot. How do we check people in, check people out? Is the front desk designed properly where it's not too high? There's a lot of buildings I go into where the front desk is just too high and the receptionist can't see over it. So they can't see the threats that are coming at them. They're really the early warning sign a lot of times for the rest of the people in the building. So they need to have good situational awareness and be able to see over that front desk. And just looking at all the different technologies we can use once we get internal that can really help prevent something from happening. And then also the big thing is the response. If something does happen, what technologies and systems do we have in place in the design and just how the building's designed to help respond as far as evacuation, ingress, egress routes? If we're putting fencing up, do we have breaks in the fence for first responders to respond to more entry points than just the front entrance? So it's really looking at everything and going from there and help mitigating as we go internal into the building. Next slide. So, benefits of starting early in the design phase is definitely cost. Cost of the client. If the consultant gets involved earlier, it saves cost, saves a bunch of time. Um, if we get involved late, sometimes things have to change up. It takes more time, all sorts of things with that. So definitely cost is a big thing, and all clients love saving costs. So that helps a lot. And then the other big thing is cohesive systems, making sure the systems are picked that work best with your design. So there are limitations to security systems, whether it's mass communication, gunshot detection, access control, intrusion, cameras, all sorts of different things. So if we get involved early, we can really pick the systems that work best with your design and talk to each other the best. So, I mean, there's systems out there where the cameras integrate with mass communication. The mass communication is integrated within the access control, also in the fire alarm system. So all sorts of different things. So cohesive systems and their systems working best for them is the best solution possible for all clients. And then the ability to adjust. If we get involved early and we put something and it has to change design just a little bit and we submit it to the client doesn't like it, then we can adjust and find something maybe that'll fit both. And so being able to adjust on the fly is definitely good with getting the consultant involved in the early stages, and it saves time. It doesn't, push back start date or finish of the building. Next. So the building has purpose and design. It's up to us to work with that, right? Again, going back to K through 12 or even a headquarters for a company, it has its design, it has its purpose. They want it to serve a certain purpose. We have to work around that. We can't change too much, but we can definitely change enough to make the building a lot safer and it's still functional for that client and they like it. So, we don't want to get involved to change the beauty of the building. It's our job to make sure the beauty of the building stays and we just make it safer. Although we might want to maintain the building's aesthetics, life safety is always number one mission. In life safety, whether I'm working with, let's just say, a client, not even with an architect, if I'm working client direct with their crisis management plans of how they respond to fire, active shooter, inclement weather, anything like that, life safety is always number one. Employees of the client, they're the most important thing. After that, then it's, brand name of the client and budget and everything else. But we always have to consider life safety when designing things. So I think that's a big part. And if we design beautiful buildings that are dangerous and something happens, does it tarnish our brand? And that's something we have to think about on that side is liability. Is if we design a building that's a gorgeous building, but security wise, it just doesn't function well and something happens, does it tarnish our name? So it's things to consider when that's happening as well. Next. So different things we consider and different systems to consider. Fencing, cons and pros of fencing. So there's a big thing going on in the market right now, and I call it castle model, where you see it a lot in K through 12, higher ed. You're seeing corporate buildings do it now in private sector. Is there fencing around everything? The whole building is being fenced, and that's now we're safe and secure and nothing can come in. But from our aspect, when we look at that, yeah, fencing helps as long as we're doing fencing in the right way. A lot of people are doing fencing where there may only be one entrance into the location. Then once you're into that client's, let's say, parking lot or past a security checkpoint, then it breaks off into different areas where you have employee parking, you have, let's say, student parking, visitor parking, whatever you have over there, and people can go from there. But it's still a lot of times only one entrance going into the main area. We have to consider all different types of events and mitigate all different types of security concerns. And a concern for us is active shooter is a big one. Is if we fence off the whole location, we're now funneling law enforcement all through one point, where if a shooter is smart and wants to do what they want, they can set up and just shoot at law enforcement as they come in, because they only have one entry point now to come into. The other thing we have to consider, whether it's active shooter or even a fire, is if it's a mass casualty event, EMS has to come in. There has to be enough room for fire, EMS, law enforcement. And when we show up on scene, there's like 100 cops coming. It's going to be a lot of cars, all sorts of different things. Where are we setting up casualty collection point? Where are we setting up triage of who needs to be evac to the hospitals faster? Who can wait a little bit? And all these things take a lot of space and multiple entrances. So if we're doing fencing and we want fencing to go around the whole area, we just have to be able to consider putting maybe emergency entrances of gates that can swing open or release at different locations in the back of the building, on the side, so law enforcement can enter from numerous locations now. If there's not room in the parking lot for EMS to set up mass cal and triage, is there a side entrance that can be swung open so ambulances can come in that route and they're not being blocked up by all the rest of the first responders coming in? So it's different things with design we need to consider just when it comes to the fencing. Again, lighting is a huge thing. Everybody's using LEDs today, so that's a good thing. But where are we placing lighting? How is lighting working for us? And how much distance do we have with lighting? Lighting even comes when I work with a lot of clients of, well, we're doing this, we want to put lights, but we get complaints from the neighbors that it's too bright. So how do we design them so it's still serving the security function, but not bleeding outside of our specific area where people are complaining about it then? Definitely cameras are a huge thing these days. There's some very cool technology out there on the market. We just have to integrate them the right way and work with the design that you guys are doing. Integrators will like to come in and throw up cameras everywhere. And a lot of times I'll get from clients, well, why is this camera looking at a wall? And it's just things like that, where getting a consultant involved can then go, okay, I want a camera here, and it's a 180-degree camera, and that'll be able to watch all of this instead of putting these 4 cameras in these different locations. So when it comes to the design of even camera systems, camera placement, all that, it's good to get involved early. Getting good access control system that can work with your cameras. And there's cool access control systems out there now on the market where employees don't even need badges. So that's nice. And you can manage your access control systems when we're looking at lobby design for visitors, contractors, employees, things like that. There's touchless entry now. So when we look at safer buildings and mitigating risk of spreading COVID and touching things and stuff like that, we can do a lot with the design as far as that goes as well. And then your mass communication system and gunshot detection, those things really help on the response side. And we can integrate into the design of what you're doing to help that. Mass communication can be everything from overhead pages to systems like Everbridge that go out to everybody's phones or go out to only key personnel. So we have to make sure when we do placement of those during the design phase, they're in good locations as well. Okay, next. And this is just something we always consider with design when we're looking at stuff. I always look at issues in a 3-phase response. What can we do with design to prevent emergencies from happening? What can we do to design spaces that help our clients respond and respond safely? And then what about our design helps those clients really stand back up and get operational and profitable again as soon as possible and work their business continuity plan? So I always got to look at that stuff when I consult for different companies, and also help with the A&E side of things as far as design as well. Next slide. There's just some other things that we've been hearing recently when we get involved early with the design phase is clients are often curious because of security consultants involved, and they ask for more things. Hey, what can we do on the training side? You know, what can we do with policy and procedure development? How can we work with you guys again to help us on a different building because you're doing all this for us? And then can you help form our crisis management teams? I just did again a new design for a school, and right away they were like, oh, can you help with this, and they are coming to us for everything now, and our team. So there's a lot of things that we can bring that will help clients come back because they have great looking buildings, but they're also safe and they're comfortable in their space. So just other things to consider. Next. Again, our responsibility, just knowing the security consultants, our responsibility is safety and security of our clients. So we always put that first. A good security consultant will do that, and will work very well hand in hand with architects. So again, you're seeing it as a growing trend on the market. And it's a great thing. I think it's definitely a move to be more proactive than reactive. And a lot of times in the United States, we've been a reactive culture. It takes something to happen for us to go, oh yeah, we need this. So I see it as security consultants getting involved with design and things like that, of us becoming more proactive. And that's a good thing. Having specialized security consultants really can set you apart when you're responding to that RFP, when you're doing different things, and clients are looking at that now. So again, it's all positive. Okay, just notice a question. We have, oh, and this is perfect. It's at the question point. So it says, we have seen the collapse of fences and barricades under mob attack in DC. Do you have any recommendations for anti-climb fences? Yeah, we do a lot with anti-climb fences. If it was me, I'd electrify everything. No, I'm just kidding. But no, yeah, there's different things you can set up. You know, a lot of times if it's something like a mob or civil unrest things, again, nothing's 100%, right? So at that type of security emergency, our fences are buying us time so we can respond and get people to safety. So at that point, if we're looking at a mob like DC, where it's 1,000 people, 2,000, 3,000 people, if they want to get through a fence, they're going to get through a fence. However, we need to make sure we're designing fences that are anti-climb, that are sturdier, that are at least 8 feet high with 45-degree cant outward at the top. So it's preventing people from climbing. I always like to use wrought iron, nice decorative fencing, because it looks nice for the client too. It's definitely harder to get through than chain link as well. But really fencing at that point for that type of emergency, it's buying us time. It's buying us time to get our employees, our clients, our visitors in the building, something like that, to a safer area, allowing first responders and more people to respond to our location. If that answered that for you.
Thank you.
Now, at this time, what questions do you guys have? I am more than happy to take questions and answer anything for you.
So again, you can just unmute yourself, ask questions like several have done, or you can throw them in chat. I know a couple folks have thrown some things at Ryan. Any other questions do we have? Hey, Ryan, while folks are thinking about questions, what would you say is the biggest challenge you have working with engineers and architects?
Well, I'm doing a challenge right now with a state architect. Is when we go after projects together or respond to RFPs that are mostly security based, but out there for architects and engineers to chase, is understanding security projects happen differently than architectural projects, where some clients will decide they really like a 25, 50, 75, 100% result at different time marks. A lot of times that's not how security works, because there's different things that pop up. Now, when you guys are designing buildings at those rates, we can work with that very easily. I'm doing assessment on a statewide project right now, and assessments, you know, should be looked at as every building has its own unique challenges, and they want it done as it's like 7 different locations. They want them done just as one briefing for all 7 locations. And it's just trying to work with architects, because again, security consulting is new, to help architects and engineers understand, like, hey, it functions a little different. This is how we look at things. We can integrate very well with you and work with you. But we just have to do it as different steps, especially on larger scale projects.
Okay, good, thanks.
I had a question. Can you
Go ahead, Spencer?
Yeah, Ryan, good, great presentation. I've really enjoyed it. Now you've talked a lot about physical security, fences, cameras, lighting, things. Do you also deal in other types of security, like, for example, eavesdropping, electronic type of security measures?
Yeah, I've had to do that in the past for embassies and other things. So yeah, we can definitely deal with that. We have a whole team in Bastrop, and our Bastrop office is strictly like security engineers that just deal with broad spectrum of technologies, whether that's eavesdropping and all sorts of different things. So yeah, I've dealt with that in the past, especially I dealt with an issue of a certain government trying to fire a certain laser through a certain embassy's windows. I can't say which ones, to then eavesdrop on their calls. So windows had to be a certain thickness to prevent the laser from getting through. There's different things we have to do. So yeah, we can deal with all that stuff.
Thank you.
Other questions? Ryan, how much have you been involved? Are you involved in construction side, and what kind of challenges do you see on the construction side or implementation?
When we get involved, usually it's in the SD phase. We're usually getting involved, and we'll start there, and then we'll always be going out even through construction phase, because we want to make sure during construction phase the integrators are putting stuff exactly where we want it.
Right.
We're following through the whole project, because we want to make sure. A lot of people think like camera companies and people that put in the technology, they're security companies, and they're not. They're just putting in a technology, and a lot of times they're not security guys, so they don't know where to put certain things, how to, certain aspects of how we position things. So we're involved the whole way through, because I want to make sure all the tech is being put in exactly where we want it. And that even gets into the clients that want what we call low profile, making sure people don't know it's there, or certain things. So we're involved the whole way through.
And could you describe some challenges that you face during construction for some of the folks here that are in that world?
Yeah, it's just the construction side. It's just making sure everything is where it's supposed to be. Also, more on the construction side is we've seen sometimes where in recommendations of design, we'll recommend a certain material is used. And sometimes that gets lost in translation and they don't end up using that material. So we're going out and checking that. Those are probably the main challenges, just to make sure everything is designed right.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. Hey, I think David Holgado might have had a question. David?
Yes. Hey, Ryan, thank you so much. It's a good presentation, very informative. So I have a question regarding the active shooter detection. Can you expand a little bit more regarding the methods that you mentioned, the eagle eye and the direct line side, please?
Yes. So there's different technologies out there on the market. I use a certain kind just because I like it better. It's usually cheaper to the client because you don't need as many of them, because they're not line of sight. And they're also, it was developed by the DOE, by the Department of Energy. So it's very interesting how it works. It actually goes off the displacement of energy, the bullets displacing flying through the air. So it's super high tech. It doesn't have false positives like some of the others. And it's integrated into your mass communication system. So if a gunshot is fired, it takes the human error away from having that front desk person have to pick up a phone and call the PD while someone may be shooting. That's not realistic. Most people are going to run or, get out of the area. So within 2 seconds, the gunshot detection system will pick up that gunshot. You have it programmed in where within 2 seconds, it calls law enforcement. It notifies your mass communication system. It can notify all sorts of different people. You can also integrate it with your camera system. So now your camera will move to the gunshot detection sensor that keyed, and it can track suspect through the building. So you can see where they're moving to, what's happening. And that helps with both the law enforcement response and the response of employees that might still be trapped within the building.
Thank you. Any additional comment regarding AI in that regard?
Yeah, the artificial intelligence is being used a lot for the facial recognition and not so much for gunshot detection, because that has certain points that'll key it off and kick it off, but a lot more for that. There's AI out there on the market that's working into cameras as well for gunshot detection, but weapon detection. So if someone pulls out or if someone's walking into a building with a gun in their hand, the camera will see that and can then key law enforcement or someone else. That stuff is still very, very new to the market. I'm not recommending it yet to clients or integrating it yet, because I still think they have a lot to tweak out with it, because I was able to key one of the systems by walking into a building with a hairdryer in my hand. So there's always new technologies that are coming out there. It's just which ones we want to include in our design and really how tested they are, so that our client, if we put them in, isn't displeased with then false positives being put into their building and having to respond to a hairdryer, and really making sure everything is worked out in the tech first.
Okay, good. Thanks, Ryan. Hey, we did get a question under chat. Nancy Coulter asked, how are you integrating cybersecurity with physical security?
Yeah, so we bring in a firm. IMEG doesn't do cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is so advanced now that there's so many different sides to cyber, whether it's the penetration side or someone seeing if you're getting hooked up, or the preventative side. So we actually we team up with a firm that we use on everything, and they do a lot of government work as well. Now, where our aspect comes into integrating with cyber is making sure those server rooms are secure and under certain access control and cameras and are designed safe, that they can't be penetrated or entered by a person. And we're working on that side more of the physical security aspects and the more gap analysis to look at how are your computers secured? How are offices designed so that people can't see screens from outside if you have glass offices? How is, and we work through more that aspect to then integrate with cyber specialists to make sure it's a big picture and everything is covered from that end.
Great, good. All right, last chance for any questions. Anybody got anything else they want to ask Ryan?